Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Baker. This is our first lecture video for our first unit of biology. Before I go any farther, you've probably seen the little ticker at the bottom to say how much time this is. It is one of the longer videos. Most of them are not this long. They are this long because I want to talk to you about how to take notes for a lecture video and kind of tell you what I expect, right? Just like we went over my class expectations at the beginning of the year, first day of school, this is same thing, right? Obviously, I want you to watch and pay attention to these lecture videos. They are our class lectures. Just like if we were taking notes in class and I expected you to sit and listen and pay attention and write things down, that's here, all right? So if you're doing something else right now, stop doing that other thing. Put your phone away if you're at home, turn off any other stuff. This is your work. As you go through this, I think it's a good idea to hit pause every time I change what's on screen and write down what's on the screen. Give yourself some space. Don't fill up every little bit of your notebook. And then as I am talking over that material, write down anything that you catch that I say. If I say something's important, mark that it's important. If I give an explanation or you think of a question, write those down in your notes. Highlight them, circle them, whatever it is you want to do. And then when we go over notes in class and Mr. Baker walks around and grades this work, I can answer those questions. If you think it's something a little longer, you can always shoot me an email. I will more than happily talk with you about it. I can give you other videos to watch that I know are good and have good explanations. All right. But I'm always happy to field those questions. Just sometimes it requires a little bit longer than what we've got in class. During the video, I will have some questions for you. So as we go through the video and I give you some questions just off to the side in the margin or on like the right half of your paper, however you want to do it, answer the question. Probably a good idea to also write down what the question is. So without further ado, let's start. Unit 1, Section 1. We are in biology, but first let's talk about what science generally is. Right? This first unit is more about science as a whole rather than biology. Right? Science is the collection of observations, inferences, and models that are produced through a systematic study of nature that enables humans to exercise proper dominion over God's world. So there's two parts to this and a purpose. The first part are the observations, inferences, and models. That's all the things you find in a textbook, in readings. It's going to cover a lot of what we do in class. Biology is just way too big to do any other way. We will always be standing on the shoulders of proverbial giants, looking down at what they've done and learning from it. The second half is the systematic study of nature. That is the process of experimenting, of researching, of finding information. And then our purpose, it's to exercise proper dominion over God's world. When we forget why we're doing things, I want you to come back to this. Right? This is our definition of science. It's definitely something you will need to know. And we get that purpose from Genesis 1:28. In the first chapter of the Bible, God creates everything. In verse 28, he tells humans it's our job to take care of it. That is the first command of the Bible, and it lasts through the fall, and it lasts into the second covenant where we live right now. Right? We study science because it allows us to take care of creation better. It is not our world, it's God's world, and it is our job to keep it as nice as possible. During this year, we will talk a few times about differing viewpoints on science. So just as a kind of warm up and thought exercise, I want you to think about why it's important to know what truth is as we study and give me a sentence or two about it. I think you'll probably be okay with one sentence. Try not to write too much here because it is just a thought experiment. The scientific method is a very, very basic understanding of that study process, right? It is going to allow us to jump in and out. As professional scientists, you might have a job that is just researching or just hypothesis and experimenting and testing hypotheses. Some people spend their whole lives in that area as research and development engineers, right? The part at the end where we draw conclusions and make reports are how we communicate the information to each other, right? It's a series of steps that allows us to think about, talk about, and understand the world around us because science is focused on knowing how or why things happen. Parts of those that I want you to kind of know a little bit more about. Hypotheses are always reasonable explanations for what has been observed. They are more than just an educated guess, right? They are informed by research that you've done, and they are statements. They are always going to kind of make a claim. If something happens, then this will happen, is a good way to think about it. And when we test if a hypothesis is correct or incorrect, we might call them accepted or not accepted, or proven and non proven. That's an experiment, right? Sometimes the test is going to be really long. It's going to be a very, very long experiment. Sometimes it's going to be a very short experiment. Sometimes we might be recreating other people's experiments. As part of that, there are a few things I want you to know. The first is a control group. A control group is just a regular treatment, or they don't get whatever the experiment is. It is an unchanged test, right? And it gives us a baseline to compare the actual experiment to. Don't get that confused with a constant, which is just anything that is not being changed, right? So if your control group and your experimental group are both in the same room, they probably have the same temperature, they probably have the same light, they probably have the same humidity, wind, all those things could be examples of constants. The variables that are going to change, there's going to be two kinds I want you to know, the independent variable and the dependent variable. The independent variable is whatever you are changing. So if you are going to be studying the impacts of something, that's usually going to be your independent variable. What you get to measure as the outcome of your experiment, that's your dependent variable. So independent variable is what's being manipulated or changed. Dependent is what's being measured. You could kind of think of these as input and output. Here's an example hypothesis. I want you to answer just which part of this do you think is the independent variable? What do you think is the dependent variable? You don't necessarily have to like circle them or anything. You can just say independent, blah, 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 dependent, blah, blah, blah in your notes. Here's the example answer here. All right. So for that hypothesis, if I change the liquid we're giving the plant, it will grow less, right? So our independent variable is the only thing that we're changing. We're limiting this to only one thing in the experiment. So in A, B, C here, you can see that we've changed from some kind of cola to orange juice to water. So that's what we're changing. The dependent variable is the height. That's what we're measuring. This experiment only has one independent and one dependent variable. Sometimes you're going to have one independent variable and multiple dependent variables. The control is getting water because that's what we would normally put on a plant. The constants are what are not being changed, right? We can call those controlled variables instead of a control group. I try to use the word constant instead of controlled, right? So the type of plant is the same, so it's the same species, it's the same pot size, the same soil went in, the same temperature is probably going to be used. If we were doing this in real life, we would put them in the same room or the same greenhouse. That way they get the same amount of sunlight, same temperature, same airflow, same humidity. And we're also going to control the amount of liquid given. I know it's not pictured here, but we would probably measure them out and then give them that way. When we collect data, we're going to collect it in a couple different types. Qualitative has to do with qualities, right? So things like adjectives are going to be qualitative data. Quantitative data always has numbers in it, right? Or it's going to be based on definitions, right? So while shape, you might think, oh, saying something is square sounds like an adjective, but we're really saying it definitely has 4 sides, definitely has 4 angles. Those sides are the same length. The angles are the same length, right? Those are all defined by what the shape is. It would be a good idea to know a few of these examples for quantitative and qualitative. And then I want you to apply that knowledge to this question. So hit pause, categorize these statements as either quantitative or qualitative, and then move on. There are a few different models that we're going to look at throughout the year. This is a model of DNA, right? It is a physical model. It would be one that like we can see and touch and manipulate. A graphical model is going to be anything that's like a picture on screen. So what you're looking at right now, this image of a physical model, has become a graphical model. A conceptual model is going to be more focused on relationships, so it's not going to be as well defined as a graphical model. Diagrams and drawings tend to be conceptual models because they are not as precise. On the other end of that spectrum are mathematical models, which are very precise. We will use a few of these this year, but not very many. We're not going to get super complicated with math, I promise. Right? But again, I want you to know a few examples of models. As we're studying science, I am going to be upfront. It's not perfect, right? As we get better at understanding the world around us, science changes, and that's okay. Our understanding of the world is based on what we can observe. We can only study what we call observable phenomena, events that we can measure, right? As we do that, we might introduce a bias to our observations. Our measurement tools might be wrong. Our preconceived ideas and beliefs might change how we explain something. When we are studying things, we also might not be able to limit the variables in an experiment because of things like weather or your supply of a chemical might not be what you thought it was, as pure as it was supposed to be. So we can have trouble with that. This idea of universal statements is the idea that you can't test a hypothesis that uses the word always or never, because then you'd have to check like every single day. So the example I have is for I always have a bad hair day on Tuesdays. I would have to check every single Tuesday ever for if I have bad hair that day or not. It's not a very good hypothesis. Workability means the actual ability to test that hypothesis. Can we work the experiment? Is it too big, too expensive, too long, right? It may not be feasible to actually study the thing. We might have to do a conceptual hypothesis instead of a working hypothesis. Right? I want you to know these 9 limits of science as kind of hard statements. Right? I'm not going to make you give me all 9, right? But it's probably a good idea to memorize a few of them. Right? Some of them I've just put on from the previous slide. So you might already have them down. One of the questions we're going to tackle in the next few days, probably after you've watched this video, is ethics, right? Ethics is the other side of science. Sometimes we call it the softer side of science. Right? It is the consideration of if things should be studied or how things should be studied. Right? These are very dependent on humans because humans are going to have different moral compasses. And depending on where you live, where you grew up, the nation that you're a part of, the culture you live in, they can be different. And that's okay, But as we study science, we need to be aware of those. The United Nations actually works with something called the World Commission on the Ethics of Scientific Knowledge and Technology, which is called UNESCO. And it's part of UNESCO. Right? It's abbreviated COMEST. They do a lot of high level statements on if things should be studied or should not be studied. Like they've weighed in on everything from genetic engineering and the idea of designer babies, right, to some philosophy hypotheses of being able to test on humans. In real life, if you were doing research that involved humans, you have to get approval by a board at your college that you work at or a medical team that you would work with for that kind of testing. We're not worrying about that here, just bringing it up. Do not worry about memorizing COMEST or UNESCO as things for a test. We will talk more about ethics in the next few days or so. That's it for today. Usually I don't stop on a black screen, so let's stop on a white screen, right? I advise that you spend the next minute or two thinking about what we talked about today on these notes and maybe thinking what is the most important part of this as you move forward. I will see you in class.